first off, want to say it's great to have you here. I'm really excited to talk about Alliance Orphans.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'm ready to explore more in this universe that you guys have fleshed out a lot more. And I kind of wanted to start off with the beginning. So how did you get involved in the Alliance's universe?
So Alliances is something that was co-created by myself, Luke Lieberman, and Stan Lee in one of the last collaborations of his creative life. It's something that was born out of a question that Stan asked, which is, what is more real, the world we're born into or the one we create for ourselves? Like a lot of the kind of Stan Lee stuff, he always asked the question before going on the journey. But what was nice about it is that Luke and Stan had a very long relationship as mentor-mentee for over a decade at the point in which I joined up. And Luke was a Comic-Con friend. He was somebody that I'd known from going to Comic-Con. I knew his wife. And he'd been working with Stan on and off for many, many years creatively. He left, he gave Luke his first job. And then when Luke left to go relaunch the Red Sonja franchise, which he still runs, he would come in and check in with Stan every now and then and say, like, this is what he was curious about. And like, was mindful of his time. And at some point they had said, Luke had said, I have this idea. And Stan said, I have this curiosity around the internet. And they started talking, and out of that came Alliances. It was, for me, when I was invited in, really a long process that was incredibly fun and creatively fulfilling because we didn't know the destination. We did not create this to be a movie or a TV show or what eventually ended up becoming when we launched it, which was an audio drama, and then a book. We just didn't know, and we just wanted to create. So I think for Stan, that was very liberating. To be able to just work on characters and work on stories and work on ideas, which, you've read Orphans, there's some like big ideas in there that the characters kind of represent.
Sweet. Yeah. And the more that I read of this book and the further and further I got into it, the more I could see how much love was put into these characters and this misfit group of these intergalactic people. And I love that. I'm glad you got to collaborate with Stan Lee on building this out. Is there anything from your own life that influenced the creation of this book?
Well, I'm a massive comic fan. Yeah, look, one of the wonderful things about the way Stan would communicate was through his own fandom. He loved early sci-fi serials. He loved radio dramas, which is how we ended up launching this as an Audible original initially with the universe. But like my own personal love is I was always fascinated by the early timely material that Stan had created pre-Marvel Age, pre-Fantastic Four, because he had worked 25 years or more than that probably, but at least 20 years at Marvel or Timely writing, So it's interesting to see that the Fantastic Four is the result, not the beginning of the journey. Yet it's always identified as being the beginning. And I love those kinds of sci-fi early serials where they were thematic and had deep meaning, almost Twilight Zone-y. And the stuff he worked on with Ditko and Kirby then was Tales of Suspense and these little one-offs, this very meaty Twilight Zone type stuff. So when we went off to do Orphans, we knew we wanted to kind of make it a throwback to that. And hopefully, when fans are introduced to something in the modern context, they'll be curious to revisit some they may not be familiar with. So that's my personal interest.
Sweet. And kind of stylistically, when it came to your writing, how did you approach Alliance's Orphans differently than previous projects?
Yeah. So what's cool about Orphans is that we were able to include a piece of writing that we did with Stan very early. It's like the foundations of the Alliance's universe, which is a piece that's called Traitor's Revenge, which again throws back to Stan's first work as a writer in Captain America 3, but very different, obviously, because this is intergalactic. But in that sense, this was the beginning we were able to include this kind of piece that we've been holding back and holding on to, because we wanted to introduce the, which is the character that's introduced in the beginning of the book, to readers in a kind of very fantastical, with the spirit of science fiction that we all loved. Things that can go, people can go, images that can go really out there. And with Bill, adding him onto the team, this was the best way to introduce this story. So for us, that was like that was a very like a treat in writing Orphans. And then, you know, the bulk of the book, as we moved forward, you know, it was fun to actually have, because since comic books and graphic novels are a visual medium and an artist medium, less so than a writer's medium, it was really fun to be able to work with Slimon, because Slimon Kudronsky, who does the bulk of the book, he has like a really interesting European vibe. And Luke and I, you know, and Stan too, one of his favorite characters, but certainly mine, the formative growing up, was Silver Surfer, you know, as that Shakespearean, very like cosmic, kind of guilt-ridden, heavy story. So for us, we wanted to throw back to Silver Surfer parables, which Stan did with Mobius for the bulk of the book. And Slimon did a tremendous job of showing sort of the performances of these characters in their eyes and in their soulfulness. So it's one thing to render big galactic fight scenes. It's another to be able to, you know, do those quieter moments. So definitely artist first in this case, imagination first, and ones when it's all audio.
Love it. I can say I'm a very big lore guy. I'm a big world building, fleshing out these great universes. And I wanted to pick your brain on what your process kind of is when it comes to world building a universe like this.
Time. I think it's one of those things where you have to take your time and realize that you shouldn't be precious necessarily about the material, because there's always going to be new ideas. And this is something I learned from Stan, is that you can get stuck in the mire. And this is something I would do, which is like in the world building, like you're never done with the research. You're never done with the, you know, can we get further into the backstory? But for Stan, he always said, just release it. There's always going to be new good ideas, you know, just start fresh, keep going. But for us, you know, the ability to take our time and be mindful with the characters and how they fit into the larger kind of themes of the story of Alliances was for us the most, I think the most fulfilling thing. I think it shows on the page, I hope. But time is also equals quality a lot of the times too. So, you know, right now we're in this kind of process of creation and all of our kind of various modes of entertainment, where it's like, got to get something out, like got to get to the churn, got to get into the Netflix bucket, you know? And for me, you know, what's cool about Alliances is that we have this opportunity, because we're independent, to be ubiquitous across different mediums. And with that, world building becomes a lot, you know, more fun, because you can choose to put something or a certain kind of character in audio only, where the immersive nature of that gives the listener something to imagine. Or you can do something like what we did with, you know, Orphans, a fight around a black hole, which certainly lends itself to the comic book medium.
Kind of building off of the different mediums that these stories can be told in. And to kind of cap it off, do you plan or want to expand the Alliances universe into other formats than audio or print? And if it were developed into film or TV someday, would you want it to be an adaptation or a continuation of the story, given the already cross-format nature of the stories you've told?
And no one's ever asked that. So it's a great question. It's like as if you're sitting in the chairs with all of us when we were developing this over the years. And it's still a question we ask ourselves, because there is certainly a tremendous opportunity to adapt and transform and transpose. And we're into that. Like there's certainly going to be opportunities to transpose Orphans into an audio drama, for instance, by potentially doing that. Because it brings it something different to the table. But in terms of just introducing new characters, yeah, we do have new characters that would probably best suited for an animated series or for a live action show. In that is set in the universe. So it would be probably a mix of the two, but some of the fun is actually the adaptation process as well.
Okay, sweet. That's all I got for you today. I want to thank you
Thank you.
so much for taking the time to talk with me about Alliance's Orphans, and I really cannot wait for the next installment in the Alliance's universe.
Well, we'll be sure to let you know
All right.
as it's coming your way.
All
Thank you,
right,
Bo.
sweet.
Thank you, Rob.